By the way, between you and me, I thought it was really excellent. I really enjoyed it. So well done.
Good, thank you.
I will say that on the podcast as well, but Okay, so here we go. Mike, oh, hang on. You're creaking, so I'm going to say that again. So
It's my chair.
Definitely your chair, yes. I'm your host, Sergio Angelini, and welcome to Tipping My Fedora, where we discuss movies, books, TV, radio, and much more besides, all from the darker side of the street. My special guest today is Mike Ripley, author, critic, historian, and archaeologist, and also just one of the nicest people I know in the mystery field. He's a terrific raconteur and has lots to say about publishing, about authors, and about mysteries in general. Today, we're going to be talking about his latest novel, Buried Above Ground, which has just come out in paperback. Mike, it's so brilliant to have you back on the podcast. You were, in fact, strictly speaking, my first ever guest, in the sense of our discussion was the first episode of Tipping My Fedora I ever recorded. So, welcome back.
Well, who knew there would be a second episode? Yeah.
Well, and hopefully a third as well. But yeah, but thanks so much for coming back. And, we're going to be talking about some of your latest literary endeavors. Let's tell the readers, the listeners rather, a little bit more about you. So you were in the brewing industry for a long time. That's kind of your career number one. And then at a certain point, you got into archaeology. How did that happen? And does that happen to a lot of people in the brewing industry?
Well, in several words, you can take your pick. It's either mental breakdown or redundancy. In my case, I was made redundant and decided it was a good time to have a midlife crisis. I'd always fancied myself as Indiana Jones, and I live in an area of East Anglia which is crawling with Roman remains, and it just seemed natural, and I drifted into it. I had a very happy 4 years as an archaeologist working around in either for the local government or for private archaeological research companies until my career was cut short by having a stroke. So it shows it was an exciting occupation. There's nothing else.
East Anglia is a great place. I went to university there, but I did my master's there. But that would have been 92, 93.
Oh, whereabouts?
So I was at the University of East Anglia, so in Norwich.
Yes, so was I.
Oh,
Long
right.
time before.
There you go. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. But I was UEA just to do my master's. I got my law degree from London School of Economics.
Norwich is a fine city with a terrible football team.
I used to call them the Budgies, which is a bit mean. But what are you going to do? Are they still owned by, is it Delia?
No, I think she's out of it now.
Oh, okay. Damn, I was rather like that.
I did write a book when I was an archaeologist. I concentrated a lot in Essex on what's called the Boudiccan burn layer. It's a place where Queen Boudica destroyed Colchester and then St Albans and then London. And you can trace it by the layer of ash that's left in the ground. And this all turned into a book, a novel which I wrote called Boudica the Lost Roman. My interpretation of Queen Boudica of the Iceni was based very much on Delia Smith. And there was...
Obviously.
Yeah, well, especially remember she made a famous appeal to the Norwich City fans, shouting, "Come on, let's be having you," to get the fans going. And I adopted that into the book. And there was also some line about some of the ancient Britons saying, well, Boudica is a great queen and a good cook. And in fact, she tells you how to cook something. As long as you follow it step by step, it turns out right. So I was rather proud of that. I don't think anybody else got it at all. Certainly the publishing world. But I was rather proud of that.
The secret is now out, Mike. Yeah. Well, in terms of your writing career, You and I chatted once, and you were telling me that it was Jonathan Gash who talked you into it, AAK, Dr. John Grant. Is this correct? Am I remembering this right?
No, yeah, you are. This is going back a long time. And this is back to 1987 ish,
Right.
somewhere 86, 87. And John Grant and I lived in the same village and commuted to London every morning on the same train. And whilst he was reading The New Scientist, and because he was a medic, and he was reading very learned papers on biology and genes and all that sort of stuff. And I'm reading paperback thrillers. And at one point, John said, what are you reading? And I said, it's Marjorie Allingham's Tiger in the Smoke. And I said, it's really good. It's a snapshot of London life in 1951 when it was written. It wasn't right for 1949, and it was probably out of date by 1952. But when it was there, it was absolutely like a photograph. It's great. And I said, I really wish I could do a book like, somebody should do a book like that about London crime novels in the 80s and just encapsulating what was going on in London. So there are a lot of strange things happening in London. And John just looked at me with sad expression and said, why don't you get off your fat ass and do it then? And so I was right.
Yeah. Them's fighting words.
And that's how the first Angel book was born in a strange way. I don't think John ever forgave me. It was dedicated to him.
Fantastic. As Jonathan Gash, he wrote the Lovejoy books,
Yeah.
as we now think of them. And I was going to ask you, have you heard about this reimagining they're doing of the Lovejoy? I mean, I know you worked on the Lovejoy.
Everybody's been
writer,
telling me about it because I was one of the script writers on Lovejoy. Another reason why Jonathan Gash didn't talk to me for ages. But,
no.
But I sort of came in late in the day on series 4 and 5. And that's 30 odd years ago, 32 years ago. But once the news came out, oh God, I've had loads of messages saying, is it nothing? No, it's nothing to do with me. And the words, was it contemporary reimagining?
That's the one.
So they sent shivers down my spine. And so I'm glad nobody's asked me to do contemporary reimagining. So I just think what they did to Day of Jackal, and that's enough to put me off. I'm sure it'll be terribly successful or terrible. One of the two.
I mean, and I was going to say, have you heard about the Diel and Pascoe one? Which is it?
Yeah, I rest my case. I mean,
that's quite radical idea, that one. Interesting, potentially, but I'd love to know what Reg Hill would have thought. But anyway.
Yeah, I could tell you what Reg would have thought. But the odd thing is that in the books, nearly the only female character was which was Pascoe's wife.
Yeah,
was the weakest character of the lot, which really didn't stand up at all. And the ones where Reg tried to make her put her center stage, I think it was Arms and the Woman or something, whichever one was I thought was awful, really bad. I mean, he really misfired on that one, which is a pity because the series is brilliant.
Yeah, and there are lots of terrific sort of female characters that come in to the stories, but I mean, it's a thing, isn't it? Really, I think it's sort of. I mean, that's the title of the opening of the first book, of course, is A Clubbable Woman.
Yeah,
it's a great title in its own way.
Yes, dated in more ways than one.
It sure is.
Because the clue to the killer is a 10-shilling note. Now you ask.
Because I think it was about 1970, wasn't it, when it came out? Something like just before.
Yeah.
There you go. I wonder if they update those for reprints. I hope not. Speaking of which, now we're going to be talking about the most recent one of your novels that's going to be coming out in paperback, which is going to be just around the time this podcast comes out, and it's called Buried Above Ground, which is a great title. One of the things I really like the book, and I think the book's fantastic, but one of the things you do in the book is you're quite caustic in some respects about the publishing industry as it is today, and also compare it with how it was 30 years ago. You're not necessarily very nice about it then either.
No.
So I was going to ask you, you've been at it so close to 40 years directly as an author and as an editor. So you're kind of on either end And obviously, working for Ostara, you were also having to do things like clear rights and trying to deal with, oh my God, how am I going to find the estate of this long unpublished author? So I loved it just for that. I mean, I loved all of that information, all that detail, very droll commentary on it. But how realistic is it? How close to the knuckle are you being? And also, how much has it really changed in the last 40 years? Has it changed a lot beyond just ebooks?
Well, I think it has changed. I think it would be, I honestly don't see how somebody like me would now get started. I think it would be very difficult. And I don't think I've been too unfair or too caustic. I mean, people who come off probably the best or the lightest are writers. And actually, they're most of the problem. And so, I mean, I could be really rude about writers, but it seemed, I mean, there is no, when I started, there was a set pattern, like almost like an apprenticeship. You were told, I sent off my first Angel book, and within a few days, I was asked to go in and see the crime editor at Collins Crime Club. It's quite famous.
Yeah.
The crime editor then was Miss Elizabeth Walter, who had been Agatha Christie's last editor. Right? Very formidable lady with the office lined with books. And I was shown in, and before she said hello, it's an absolutely true story. Before she said hello, who are you? She looked up from her desk and said, how many more can you do? And I said, well, 3, and then I'll probably run out of jokes. And then she said, hello, sit down. And she said, don't give up the day job until you've done 8.
8?
Yeah, that was one piece of advice I got. And you know, we'll see how it goes. And we'll certainly have a look at the second one. Now, and she was talking about only doing Collins Crime Club hardbacks, right? She has nothing to do with paperbacks. And in fact, it took a long time for me to get into paperback. And I was pleading with them to, you know, send me down market, please. Because I was curious that a contemporary of mine, Mark Timlin, was getting published as a paperback original. And he was furious because he couldn't get into hardback. all this thing. Also, I wanted to try and get into America. And when I eventually did, it was pretty disastrous. But it was a set format. That was what you were expected to do. Right. You know, do your apprenticeship, about 8 books, and then, you know, you'd either made it or you hadn't by then. And everybody said this was the 8-book rule, sort of thing. It was quite an accepted thing at the time. And nobody seemed to bother. I mean, paperbacks were people were a bit dismissive of them, you know. They were an adjunct sort of thing. And of course, when then audiobooks and ebooks, I mean, when I was doing the Angel books, we used to give the audio rights away to the Institute for the Blind.
Right.
Who did tapes.
Yeah.
You know,
because it was just for
never
them.
thought of making any money out of them. You didn't make any money out of large print books except through public lending rights. But of course, that was very important. Certainly, when I started, it was, you know, there were certain things you gave talks at libraries. It was a set pattern to everything. There were no, I mean, I was just thinking today, I became crime fiction reviewer for the Telegraph throughout the 90s. And I don't remember being invited to any publishers' lunches for books, unlike some other people. But it certainly wasn't, you know, the reviewers were, again, this was a different thing. The reviewers, there was nothing like the internet or Amazon reviews. The reviewers were almost like the Catholic Church. You approached them only in times of trouble, and and you respected them. And you know, people like Julian Simmons and Harry Keating, and later Marcel Berlins. You know, it took me a long time to get to know those guys, and some of them became very good friends. But it was curious, very staid type of thing. Of course, I wasn't aware of the stories that I could have used in the book. The publisher, who had convinced his wife for 20 years that the Frankfurt Book Fair lasted 2 weeks instead of one, so he could spend the other week with his mistress in Berlin. Or the author who actually left, chucked his hardback publisher because they wouldn't do him in paperback. Or I can think of, I know there's lots of scandalous stuff I could do about writing, but I thought nobody's really interested in that because writers themselves aren't particularly interesting, but their books are. So I thought I'd go on the books and how somebody can actually sort of almost get lost. And part of the character of there's an author in the book called Duncan Torrance, so that's his pen name, which is a pen name I've used occasionally. And he's dead, and it's what's happened to his backlist of books now that somebody's sniffing around and interested in them. I can remember there's a crime writer called Alan Hunter, very gentleman, lived in Norfolk, very gentleman, started writing a new book every year on September the 1st, regular as clockwork, as Inspector Gently. And of course, that's been made into a reimagined television series,
yes,
which I don't think he would have approved of, but long after his death. But when ebooks came in, he contacted me and he said, "Did I have a copy?" Because I'd reviewed a couple of a specific one, because he didn't have one, and his agent didn't have one, and somebody wanted to redo the whole series, and it was in terrible state. And I thought, that's sad, but you can actually forget your own books or lose.
That's terrible.
So all that sort of thing came in, but it was a different world, yes. And I think ebooks and the internet have changed a lot of things.
Do you approve? Do you disapprove? I mean, in your book, the word ebooks comes up a lot, and it's mostly presented in a kind of almost a coded swear word. Ebooks. You imagine the way they say it,
Yeah. Well, I'm speaking from complete ignorance, as I've never read one. I've never seen one. I know nothing particularly about them, except I noticed that whenever mine would be put into ebooks, the biggest cause of complaint seems to be that the screen isn't working, or it's somehow corrupted. And I said, well, sorry, but that's not my fault. I don't understand the technology, and I hate reading for pleasure on the screen.
Yeah.
I can read it when I'm writing something, or when I'm editing one of my own books, or editing something when I'm working. I have to do it, but not for pleasure. It just drives me mad. No, I want a book I can hold.
Yeah. My mum and my dad, I mean, with my dad, they both initially used an e-reader, Kindle, I think, in both of their cases. And the thing with my dad was, obviously, it meant he could change the font size, read the point size, sorry, so that he could read it more easily. Yeah. But it's because he could use he could hold it in one hand and read on his side in bed. And he'd do this for 2 hours before he managed to go to sleep. And he just had to press one button and the page would turn over. And that was brilliant, because otherwise you'd have to move your whole arm out, do all that. It sounds daft, but the convenience of it, and this is someone who had tons of books. I mean, it's not like he didn't read paper. The problem then becomes, you can't always get the stuff. My mum now reads exclusively pretty much on her phone. She reads all the time. She's always been a massive reader. And, my dad used to joke about it. Mum always had a book on the go, forever. Now she uses her phone to do it. It's just the convenience of it is so amazing. But I must admit, I'm completely paper bound. The only thing I have done is that some books that I couldn't get any other way, that were not available in paper form, I got them as you can get an e-reader that you can read on the computer. So I have read some that way. There are some collections of short stories by Ed Hoke. I really like some of his Captain Leopold stories, for instance, and some of them are only available now in ebook format. I can't buy a paper copy. Some autobiographies, or for a job I was recently, that Elliston Trevor project, his widow published a memoir about him, but you can really only get it as an ebook. So download it and read it on the computer. But admittedly, that was kind of research for for that project we both worked on. So I know what you mean. I completely get it. You kind of offer this very interesting sort of commentary on the state of affairs. I shan't ask you who's real and who's semi-real. Most recently, you did a dozen of these terrific Albert Campion books, which I think were a huge success, fantastically well done. And one of the things that in those books is that you followed nicely the theme of Albert getting older with the books. And so there's a sense, time and place is sort of quite important. So it's not Poirot, it's not one of those figures who lives to be sort of 128 or something. When it's 1968, he's 68. When it's 1964, he's 64. But what you did do was you zigzagged a bit in terms of where in the chronology you were sort of keeping him within the roughly the late 60s, early 70s framework because of just where you were and to be plausible. But then you would occasionally go back and go forward. And I was intrigued by how you did that in this new book, in Buried Above Ground, where you have the forward momentum of the story, which is told in these different voices, these different narrators, which are presented in consecutive order. So the story goes forward, even though it's being told by different people, which I think is hard to juggle. And I think structurally it's very impressive. So I really enjoyed that. But a lot of the information is all set 10, 20, 30 years in the past. So you're constantly referencing a previous era and having to keep that clear in people's minds. I was curious if maybe that was something that interested you anyway, but because I'd noticed it a bit in the Campion books, and so I was curious how you used it or chose to use it here.
Yeah, well, in the Campion books, when I picked up Albert Campion, and he would have been 69 when Marge Allingham's widow, young when Carter died. I wanted to pick it up there, but that doesn't give you an awful lot of room to maneuver. So the use of flashbacks then, part of that was quite interesting to go back to the 50s and in one case to the 30s and try and balance that. That was a necessity of telling a rounded story, I thought. Anyway, in Buried Above Ground, what I was trying to get at was that everybody these days expects the unreliable narrator. So I've given you 5 unreliable narrators. And always remember that the most unreliable narrator of all is the author. And so I'm saying all the way through, don't take this seriously. Don't take this like a classic golden age mystery where you're following timetables and picking up clues, because I don't care. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's not really a whodunit, because it's fairly obvious, I would have thought, from the start. But
well, no.
Oh, I'm glad you're surprised.
Jesus. I was. I mean, obviously, by the time you get to the last section, you go, right, okay, one had suspicions and certain things were leading you in that direction because of all the clues you've laid in. But at the same time, I think certain things like motives and the timelines don't quite make sense and you can't quite get... So if you're a bit like the Jason character... By the way, have you ever met a Jason with a C? I mean, I just feel sorry for them.
Yes,
oh,
I have.
No! Because I read that, and the first time I saw the name, I thought, Jacken? Oh, no, wait. Then I thought, oh, no, that's terrible.
Yeah. He was a very nice man.
No, and exactly. I mean, you can't blame... Well, you can blame your parents, but that's it, really. You can get all Philip Larkin about it. But in actual fact, I thought that, again, you did such a good job with that by having the, as it were, the private and the public persona in terms of how, what they say and what they think. So even Jason, actually, you get more respect for him when you hear his inner voice, if you like, as opposed to the awkward public persona.
Yeah.
And I thought that went very well. And I'll tell you something else. One of the things I really enjoyed was all the scenes with the policeman. Even with the annoying publisher, you get this fascinating sense of those cops are really annoying. And I was reading it and I thought, I would hate to be in this situation where, it's that classic scenario where it sort of doesn't matter what you say. They make it sound like you've admitted to something or it's tendentious. And I thought that was superb. In a way, it's sort of interesting because it's kind of like, I don't know how important it is, but that comes across right away. And I was fascinated because I was feeling it slightly more than the characters were, because you were telling me that they were sort of not entirely realizing perhaps that they were in some kind of danger, but I was finding it quite threatening. And I like the way you did that, because they were just really annoying. And obviously it comes up in other parts of life, where people just start to scrutinize every single thing you say and do. And I think, not a lot of things can stand up to that level of scrutiny, frankly. You have to, if you have to be objectively able to explain everything you say and do, you're going to fail. But I thought that was great.
Oh, thank you.
It worked really well. But so I kept thinking, I probably know some of the websites the Gadabout is a lovely name. I wish it were real. I have an inkling of who you might be thinking of there, but one knows people like that, obviously. And also I thought, when you did the first murder, that was a real surprise, actually. Kind of horrible in the end, the way it happens. You pick on potentially the most innocent of them all, after all.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was impressive. How did you come to this point? Having just spent best part of close to a decade on the Campion books, really?
About 12 years. 12 books, 12 years.
It was basically one a year, wasn't it? Yeah. Although you had 1 year where you published 2. Flipping hell. I was impressed. Well, because of the way you do it in your novel, I started looking at your list. I suddenly thought, you're thinking, yes, 1 a year. Oh no, you did 2 in that year.
I think I did 3 in 2005. But
3? Oh, okay. I
hadn't done one in 2004, something like that. It's just
right.
Publishers, you can't trust them.
So obviously you've been working a lot with Seven House. So this is what your 13th, and there's a 14th coming. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been with Seven House 20 years now.
Is it 20 years? Right. Hopefully you're not saying a lot of what you're saying isn't based on reality of your current situation.
No, sure.
And they look great as well. But I was just going to ask you about this. So in terms of, you finished doing the Campion series, which I certainly think, was a great success. I can't think of very many examples where they've been as good in terms of, I think the word you use is continuation. I'm not very keen on it, but okay, you sort of get the point. Very few of them last as long as that. There are several authors who I shan't speak of out loud who I really wish they would stop immediately because I think the books are terrible. And these were great. So what led you into this different idea? Where did that come from?
It started, funnily enough, if you notice at the back of the book, there are, in Buried Above Ground, there are lots of references to crime fiction.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
And there's a complete appendix given over to explaining, these are a few you may have missed, sort of thing. And the idea for that came about because I got so fed up with finding at the back of the books my playlist, like the music I was listening to. I don't give a shit about what you are listening to. It's ludicrous. And part of the fact I didn't recognize half the bands that they were talking about. But no, get drunk, put on the Rolling Stones, find a fresh sheet of paper. That's it, go for it. So I thought, right, and it was to take the mickey out of them. If you fancy yourself as, you read a lot of crime fiction, or you think you do, right, try this. And I was very tempted to put in some totally false references. But the publisher persuaded me not to keep it straight. And they're all actually genuine. And it's the sort of reading list as well, I hope, for people to widen their horizons. That's how it started. I wanted to do something like that to promote crime fiction and to incorporate crime fiction in a book. That seemed a good way to do it, just based on publishing. And that's now actually blossomed into a second book, a sequel, and there is a third on the way. So it'll be a trilogy.
The next one, the title of which is?
Played to Death.
Played to Death, and it has a nice skull on the cover.
Yeah,
This one had a typewriter. The next one has a skull. That's out in, is it June?
it's June. Yes, first week in June.
And then the next one, the final one of the trilogy, out next year. Then
Yeah, as soon as I finish it. Yes.
I was going to say you're hard at work on it, so yes.
Yeah, yes, I am now. The second one, Played to Death, without giving too much away, sees the central character of Buried actually helping the police with a murder and helping them solve it.
Oh, that sounds great.
And you get a lot of several recurring characters. Certainly the police inspector lady, police person, as I'm supposed to call them these days, and the central character, the librarian. And then in the third one, that one is written in the first person and is an homage to Geoffrey Household's Rogue Mail, and is actually called Rogue Librarian. And he has to go on the run.
He goes on the run. Does he have to sort of bury himself?
I'm giving nothing away. Nothing away. He doesn't
have to go and find a catafalque.
No, I have cats. I can't do that. That's a very in joke, yeah. But he does. He decides he has to quit. I mean, he's just retiring anyway, and finds himself threatened by various things to do with what happened in Buried Above Ground, and has to get out of town fast. And so, a bit like John Buchan, he scoots. He gets out of town and heads to the Highlands. In this case, Cumbria, actually.
Oh, which is a beautiful place, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And so substitute Richard Hannay being chased across the Scottish heather moors to my guy being chased across the Cumbrian fells.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
And there's a surprise ending, I hope.
You have a nice little self-homage right at the end of the book. I won't spoil for anybody, but I did enjoy that.
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry, I couldn't.
As a fan, of that series, that was lovely to have that. I was going to ask you, about using multiple narrators. In my head, multiple narrators, I would think, right, Wilkie Collins. That's sort of the first place I go to. Then maybe Kenneth Fearing, who seemed to not be able to not write that way. And at the moment, Janice Hallett seems to only write in this kind of multimedia format style, which I don't think suits every kind of writing.
No, Michael Innes did occasionally.
Oh, okay. I must be a bit less of a, more of an Edmund Crispin fan than a Michael Innes fan, which I know is sort of almost hard to explain because Crispin was so influenced by Innes, even Givar's Fairness from Michael Innes books. And it's funny, Appleby somehow never quite did it for me. It's one of those odd things. I mean, not the one doesn't want to get sucked into that sort of conversation because it's kind of like, oh, how do you feel about Roderick Allen? Well, not really a fan, sorry, but that's just personal taste or lack thereof. Not trying to be absolutist about any of it. But you've not really done that before, have you? The multiple narrator?
No, I haven't. There's a little bit. One of the Campions, it switched from first to third person.
Right.
Depending on which period, which flashback we're talking about.
Right.
No, not really. And I thought, again, it's the thing about popular thing seems to be to have an unreliable narrator. So I thought, well, why stick with just one? Have lots.
Yeah, and to have kind of an in and out, as it were, for both of them, the outside voice and the inside voice. The one that threw me a bit was Rabina, which was interesting because I think partly it's just the way it's laid out in the book, where you get the opening bit and you don't know if she's speaking to somebody or if she's just speaking to herself. And then, of course, the policeman turns up and all of a sudden there's quotation marks. Okay, I'm with you now. But that was very interesting because I enjoyed that disjunction. Then you hear some of it again and, it's a little different this time. So I really enjoyed it, Mike. As I say, someone who is a fan, apart from anything else, is a big fan of postmodern crime. I think where this isn't an example of that, but at the same time, I think you get all the virtues of, it's almost like a Philip MacDonald. There are moments in Rhinox or something where MacDonald speaks directly to the reader, says, "We'll skip that bit, it's boring." Things like that. Or Edmund Crispin having Gervase Fenn sort of come up with titles for Crispin, or saying, "Oh, let's turn left, this book's being published by Gollancz." That sort of stuff. I always enjoy that. So I think here it's a great example of having your cake and eating it too. Congrats, Mike. I can't wait for the next one to come out. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast to talk about it.
That's all right, mate. Pleasure.
You have been listening to Tipping My Fedora, the show about all things noir. It is produced for Castiglione Publishing by me, Sergio Angelini, and our theme tune is by Petar Milinkovic, whose work is available through Tailkeeper Music. All audio clips are the copyright of their respective owners, and used under fair dealing and fair use exceptions solely for the purposes of criticism and review. Please subscribe to Tipping My Fedora wherever you get your podcast fix, and it would be great if you could leave ratings and reviews about the show at Apple Podcasts. Be seeing you.